This week, Gillian will introduce In Time of War, a collection of diary entries, essays, talks, photographs, drawings, and memorabilia of Henry Collingwood-Selby, Royal Navy, jointly edited by his son, Richard, and Gillian, working by internet between Chile and Hong Kong. We heard first the story that forms the basis of that book, this book, when we were attending an English-speaking union, this book, an English-speaking union annual conference, which was held in Edinburgh. So we met Mr. Selby, Richard Collingwood-Selby, in Edinburgh at that conference. However, I leave it to Gillian to explain in more detail in her introduction to the book.
Thank you very much, Tommy. Yes, so we were at a conference in Edinburgh, and for the final dinner, the placing was done by the organisers, and this gentleman was on my left, and the conversation was difficult because he doesn't hear very well, and his hearing aid wasn't working. So it was rather a one-way conversation. But he did grasp that we were from Hong Kong. And he said, "Oh, my father was a POW in Hong Kong." And my immediate reaction was to say, "Did he write anything?" And he said, no, I'm sure he didn't write anything. No, definitely not. But I said, well, when you get back home, do have a look. Just check, because he may well have written something. Well, I don't think I'll find anything. But then he, at some point, contacted a cousin who had a trunk of his father's things, and it was full of papers. And the cousin shipped it out to Richard in Chile, and then over a period of a few years, he delved into the trunk and brought something out and transcribed it, and then sent me the results. Fascinating. Now, Verner actually is a very good supervisor. So every now and then, Verner would say to one, what's happening about that chap in Chile? What's happening about the work on his materials? And then, of course, I said, okay, well, I'll contact him again. So it was very sporadic, but always Verner is coming along with this gentle whip, saying, what's happening about that? It was very interesting. Well, at first, it was just a few essays or a few talks that he'd given. Some in prison camp, because we understand that's what they did. I mean, people know that they have, Catherine. People know that they gave lectures in the prison camp, partly as a way of entertaining themselves and partly education, but just to keep themselves going, really. So he gave talks, and we have the transcripts of the talks. He also gave a talk when back in England about his experiences in Hong Kong. So that was there. But then he found diaries, and his father, it seems, kept a diary throughout his life. Now, I don't know what age he began doing that, whether it was as a child or an adolescent or when he first started working. But there was a diary. There's years and years and years of diaries. And so Richard decided he would make a transcript of 1 year, and that was the year prior to the fall of Hong Kong. But there was also embedded in talks diary entries from the time when he was a prisoner of war. So within this book, we have that 1 year of Hong Kong prior to the fall of Hong Kong. And then we have quite a lot of material of daily happenings when he was in prison camp. We also have letters, a letter from him to his children, a letter from his wife to him, and a letter from his girlfriend to him. I was quite surprised that the son sent me the letter from the girlfriend for publication. It's a very passionate letter. Because, and I said, are you quite sure? won't anybody mind? And he said he thought nobody was alive who would mind. So we also have, most interesting, there's a letter from the wife after it was known in England that Hong Kong had fallen, when she didn't know whether he was alive or not, and a letter from the girlfriend, I think the same day, knowing that he was alive, but a prisoner. So very interesting indeed. And then apparently Richard knew nothing about this. The son knew nothing whatsoever until he started working with me on these documents. And I did say to him, do you find this interesting? And she said, well, yes, I knew nothing whatsoever about this before. It's a very interesting window into my father's life. And he did remember the girlfriend, that she did marry in England, and I think it was the Isle of Wight they lived on. You live on an island, don't you? Lived on. And they had visited. And it seems that the girlfriend was a daily topic of conversation, as if she was a family friend. Once Henry was back in England living with his wife and children. So that's very, very interesting situation. Now what I'm going to do, I just mentioned some dates because I don't know about you, but when I arrived in Hong Kong I knew nothing whatsoever. I didn't know that Hong Kong had been under Japanese occupation. I didn't actually know that Hong Kong was an island. I really didn't. Why was that? Because my first job was in Nigeria, and I read a lot of information about Nigeria before I went there, and none of it was of any use whatsoever. So I thought, well, now I'm going to Hong Kong, I won't bother, just see what it's like when I get there. The head of department met me off the plane, and he and his wife took me for lunch. Then they took me for a drive around the island. They said, well, that's it. I said, you've seen it all now. Didn't mention Kowloon, of course. So the dates are the 8th of December 1941, Hong Kong became at war with Japan. Hong Kong surrendered on Christmas Day 1941, and the Japanese surrendered on the 16th of September 1945. You may not remember dates, that's why I wrote them down. Some people in Hong Kong are so imbued with the history of this particular time in Hong Kong that they would know these dates in their sleep. So I'm not one of those people. But when I was working on it, I knew it. Now this is supposed to be, this series of talks is to introduce books by Hong Kong-based writers. So in this case there are two Hong Kong-based writers. One is the gentleman whose picture is on the front cover, the person who was the prisoner of war in Hong Kong, and the other one is myself. So his are the original works, and my contribution is as editor, working with his son. I should say that the son was heroic because he was a very busy man, and he transcribed his father's handwriting, so some of it on very thin paper, very faded ink. So it really was a labour for him to do it. And then, because Richard, the son, didn't know Hong Kong, the place names were very difficult. Because if the handwriting is bad, but you know about a place, you can guess what the handwriting is saying. But he didn't have that to help him. So then I would have to say, are you quite sure it says this? Perhaps it says that. Well, yes, maybe it says that. And from my point of view, some difficulty because some of the geographical features don't exist anymore because hills have been levelled, for example. So I might not have got searching for a name of a place or a mountain or a hill. And then there were nicknames that they gave to places. And so it was really very difficult to know where they were talking about. Right. So,
would make a reading more interesting, though.
Yes, indeed. Yes, detective story. Absolutely. So the materials here answer curiosity in many different levels. One is about what was Hong Kong like before the Second World War. One was, what is it like to be a prisoner of war? What is daily life like in a prison camp? And the other is, what is the life of a married man like, separated from his wife, living in Hong Kong? So those are questions which this book helps us to answer. So now I'm going to give you the results, in other words, selecting from the material and grouping it in these categories. And Verner, very kindly, will read some of the extracts. Okay? And if you do want to ask a question, that's fine. And you can also keep some questions for the end. All right? Thank you. Right. So before I should say that Harry Selby had been in the Royal Navy at the end of the Great War as a very young man. But then after World War I, people were decommissioned. So he wasn't in the Navy anymore, and he was very disappointed. He describes himself as having been axed, that's his word. And so he wanted something that was as close as possible to being in the Royal Navy. He joined the Chinese Maritime Customs Service. You probably know that this service was run mainly by expatriates, working as civil servants, in a sense, for Imperial China. So he was doing that for a number of years. And then when the Second World War was seen to be imminent by the authorities, he got a message asking him to return to duty, active service, in the Royal Navy and to report to Hong Kong. So his first reaction, I don't know whether he was delighted, finally I'm going back to the Royal Navy, or whether, but what is written is concern about his superannuation. It was taking out the money after those years, and the rate of exchange was poor, and it was very little after so many years' service. At any rate, he did as instructed, I suppose, not requested, and turned up in Hong Kong. It seems that he was an efficient and competent and reliable officer. However, he seems to have had a very good time as well. Lots and lots and lots of social activities. He lived at 2 Carnarvon Road, and so a lot of the activities are Kowloon and New Territories based. That's sort of the starting point. So there were launch parties with bathing, cocktail parties, dances, hot dog parties, progressive dinners. You know, you have the soup in one person's flat, the main course in somebody else's, etc. Tennis, teas, tiffins. Plenty of places to go, lots of clubs. The China Fleet Club, the Equine Sports Club, the Hong Kong Club, the Kowloon Cricket Club, the Peak Club, I don't think that exists anymore, the United Services Recreation Club, and the Yacht Club. It's quite a modern ring, in a sense. Then what about the hotels and restaurants? Some of these will be familiar and some won't be. Cafe Wiseman, Chanticleer, Dairy Farm, and Hong Kong Dairy Farm, the Gloucester Hotel, Grips, that seems to be a nickname for the Hong Kong Hotel. On one occasion they went there for Ovaltine, very domestic, to go to a hotel for Ovaltine. Jimmy's and Hong Kong Jimmy's, again the Hong Kong Hotel Roof Garden, the Parisian Grill, referred to as PG, not PG Tips, but Parisian Grill, the Peninsula, and the Repulse Bay Hotel. All these places. Then invitations to the homes of friends, dinners, on one occasion, supper. Again, a rather humble supper, sausage and mash and remnants from a yacht party. And he describes it as very jolly, friendly, natural party. And on one occasion, he gave a dinner party in Tama. Now, about 9 months after he arrived in Hong Kong, he met school teacher and later teacher training college lecturer, Australian, Daisy, or Day, Sage. By the end of December 1941, he'd given her a ring. With her, he had frequent drives into the countryside, picnics and walks. And most likely, it was with her that he attended most social events after they met. They were not only culture, not only eating and drinking over tea and bathing parties, but culture as well. The school's music society's concert at the diocesan boys' school, a classical concert by a lady from Shanghai, theatricals, an amusing show at the China Fleet Club, possibly called Pure and Simple. I wonder what that implies. There was a sketch which he describes as daring. I wonder what that was about. Lots of films, and the cinemas he names are Queen's Theatre, the Alhambra, the Oriental, and the Majestic. I have a list of the films, but I won't read them out, but very interesting films. On one occasion, he went to a Chinese play at the Taiping Theatre. I don't think that exists now. The Taiping Theatre? No. And in his diary he wrote, "Number 2 China actor. Very interesting and amusing. Spitting, vertically and horizontally." Sounds very interesting. Stagehands putting stools or cushions under heads of fallen. So somebody's died on stage and somebody puts a cushion under their head or a stool so the actor isn't too uncomfortable. Good mime of sewing. Fights on and off stage. Children in wings. Translator behind us. Well, that was very convenient, wasn't it? Now, Day Sage, but not Harry, went riding and played mahjong. The two of them went shopping in Wing On and Sincere. They both studied Cantonese. You're very happy to know that. And of course, he wrote his diary. He drew. There's some nice drawings in the book. Wrote letters to his wife, children, brother, mother, friends, and bought presents with all the women in his life and his children. He attended to his finances, paid attention to local events, to news of the war in Europe and the impending war with Japan. He observed people and creatures. He noted the weather and its changes. He was a very observant person. He seems to have loved nature, the landscape, flowers, creatures. So some of the notes in his diary: wind in pines and fields of water hyacinths. Walked far side of valley, bottled brush trees crimson. Curious green caterpillars on candlenut resembling flowers. Lovely night, young moon. Quite romantic in his attitude to nature. Over time, the films became more related to what was happening. One was called Escape to Glory, another Frontiers We Guard, and Matahari. The Matahari is a beautiful spot. Then he records activities and events closely related to the war and the expectation of an attack in Hong Kong. He attended a lecture on decontamination. She started hospital training. He listened to Attlee's broadcast on the meeting at sea of Roosevelt and Churchill. There were occasional blackouts. And on the 16th of November, the Canadian troops arrived. On the 29th of November, there were civil defence exercises, so very interesting that they began to be some sort of preparations. And on the 4th of December, he wrote to his son, the letter wasn't received until after the war was over. And then on the 8th of December 1941, he records in his diary, "At war with Japan." And looking back on this day from the perspective of being a prisoner of war, he wrote,
"Sunday, the 7th of December 1941, was a very happy day for many hundreds of Chinese who made a pilgrimage to the Tiger Balm Temple in the lovely Shatin Valley. Buddhist nuns assisted the aged along the country paths, family parties picnicked under the trees, and I exchanged with them friendly smiles and remarks and enjoyed with them the peace and beauty of the countryside and the bustle and solemnity of the temple service. 24 hours later, I was grieving for those contented, happy people, now terrified, bewildered, and worse. The peace of 100 years of prosperity and progress had been shattered."
So he's referring to the 100 years of British administration, which began unofficially in 1841, before the treaty. He has, for those people who are interested in who are really interested in military history, he does give a good description of the naval and military assets that Hong Kong had for its defence. And he narrated how these changed as hostilities progressed. I'm not going to go into that. But many of the details of what he says about the fall of Hong Kong, the battle for Hong Kong and the fall of Hong Kong, are probably unique in the book. There are many different accounts of the battle for Hong Kong by other people, but everybody's is unique. So this adds to the jigsaw of information that's already known. So we're just going to tell you what happened to him. And in his 1941 diary, he writes,
"My own little ship was Red Star, and our job had been to lay and tend the controlled mines. These were strings of mines laid across the approaches to Hong Kong harbour. Electrical devices would indicate in a hut ashore when an enemy submarine or other vessel was crossing any particular branch of these mines, and on the appropriate button being pressed, up she would go. On dawn, on Monday, 9th of December, I was standing alone by my ship in the Kowloon Naval Yard when I saw a small plane pass over the harbour at a great height. Well, that's a Jap, I thought. The balloon's going up. And at that moment, a messenger came along with a sheaf of signals saying that we were at war with Japan. Hardly had I read these when there came the noise of many aircraft, the shriek of power diving, and the crash of bombs. I ran up to the Red Star's bridge and could see over the Kai Tak airfield planes diving and turning in the sunshine and smoke rising. And presently, Sham Shui Po barracks about a mile away began to get it too. In accordance with orders, I cast off and backing out through the narrow entrance began to cruise at slow speed round the harbour. Our sole armament consisted of 2 Lewis guns.
On Thursday, the 11th of December, they were told that the army was about to withdraw from Kowloon to Hong Kong Island, and Harry was ordered to destroy all signal and code books to prevent them falling into enemy hands. He comments that this was a hot job, feeding them one by one into the fire. The same day, Red Star was instructed to evacuate all the staff, police, and so on from the Kowloon Naval Yard. Once everyone was aboard, including an old Chinese armour, they shoved off across the harbour. And almost immediately, a shell exploded alongside, and the same gun continued to target them all the way across. After waiting in the shelter of the naval dockyard, Red Start obeyed orders to move to Aberdeen Harbour, which he describes as normally the home of fishing junks. The next day was spent at a buoy, B-U, American pronunciation, buoy, is that correct? And the sailors very enthusiastically went about daubing the ship with green and brown paint to make her inconspicuous, so they wouldn't be bombed, wouldn't be targeted. And then the military completed their withdrawal from Kowloon to Hong Kong Island without any interference with the Japanese. It's very interesting. On the 15th,
ordered to proceed to Deepwater Bay, Red Start escaped a stick of bombs. Harry wrote, "As we steamed up the narrow harbour, there was a tremendous hullabaloo of anti-aircraft and Lewis guns going off. But there was a lighter moment, as Harry records. It happened to be my breakfast time, and I.E., my Chinese boy, feeling completely safe in his tin hat, calmly brought my bacon and eggs up to the bridge as usual."
Once in Deepwater Bay, they were ordered to take all the ammunition and torpedo warheads from Thracian, the sole remaining destroyer, which had run aground and crumpled her bow. Not surprisingly, in view of the possibility of getting bombed, this was unwelcome cargo. They made themselves as inconspicuous as possible and warped the ship close under a steep hillside. And they were actually bombed, but they managed not to be hit, otherwise they wouldn't be here. Then they got the welcome news that they could get rid of the ammunition. Thank you, Dan. The rest of the day was strangely quiet, owing to the Japanese having sent over to the governor to demand our surrender. No, the governor didn't surrender. The next day the bombing was intense, and by daylight the Japanese were well established on the heights. On Friday, 19th of December, Harry wrote,
"Friday was a sad morning, for it saw the end of the little ship. Orders came that all ships were to be scuttled to save them from falling into enemy hands. We had a good meal, opened up the sea cocks, and shoved off in the motorboats, leaving the sinking Red Start with 3 ensigns flying defiantly."
They landed at Aberdeen and reported at the naval headquarters at the industrial school in Aberdeen. And from then onwards, they fought on land with the army. On the 21st of December, Harry was fighting on the slopes of Shewson Hill, and there's a sketch to illustrate that, and it was here that he was wounded.
"I suddenly became aware of a pair of beady eyes in the shadow of the bushes. Ping! Ping! A heavy blow on the left side, which spun me round to fall on a bed of parsley, involuntarily exclaiming, 'They've got me!'
After a while, and becoming aware that the defending force had withdrawn, he was able, with the support of his favourite walking stick, which was bullet-scarred and may have saved my life, he wrote, to totter down the road to a dressing station. After half an hour, 2 ambulances arrived, and he and others were taken first to the Aberdeen headquarters in the industrial school, then to Queen Mary Hospital. Subsequently, he spent time in 3 other hospitals as well: the Royal Naval Hospital, St Albert's Auxiliary Hospital, and Bowen Road Military Hospital. His complaints were bullet wounds, dysentery, and pneumonia in these various hospitals.
Later, in Hong Kong POW camps, he was to suffer beriberi, lumbago, eye problems, vitamin B deficiency with edema of the ankles, and right shoulder ache. We also know that he must have lost a lot of weight, as by 1945 his lower denture no longer fitted.
Harry's wife, by the way, didn't know he was alive and a prisoner of war until she received a telegram from the Admiralty in June 1942. When he was in hospital, he went out foraging. And there was no wire and no guards, no Japanese in sight. On one occasion, he brought back a pot of geraniums, a sack of charcoal from the government wood dump, which was received gratefully by the sisters for their irons, still ironing their uniforms. Steam iron, I suppose, wood-fired. He also brought back a bunch of azaleas, a waste paper basket, soap dish and ashtrays, and a ground sheet, a gas cake for Commander Millet. So in and out of hospital, even though they're technically prisoners, they're getting all these useful things. He mentions number 41 Stubbs Road, the Choi family house. Does that ring a bell? He salvaged some books, bootlaces, a tape measure, some scraps of striped sunblind, which later made gay cushion covers to brighten up his space in the prisoner of war camp. He got some stockings, a hat, some children's blue gowns, which were later unpicked and hemmed to make curtains and tablecloths, trying to make it homely. He brought back some brass shell cases for use as flower vases, but these were confiscated. Some cartridge cases, which were made into a set of chessmen. Another time he found a brand new bucket, and later several Cape ground sheets, shaving brushes, and a mosquito net. He bought various things, a pair of army boots for $2, and a pair of Canadian deck shoes for 2 packets of cigarettes. This was in the camp. Following discharge from hospital, he was interned in 3 successive prison camps: North Point, Argyle Street, and Shamshri Po. So he was good with his hands. He made himself a deck chair with a little shelf. He made Christmas decorations out of the silver paper from cigarette packets, etc. He gave a series of talks. He was one of the speakers giving a series of talks. And very surprisingly, he slept outside. He didn't sleep in the hut. The reason was he wanted some fresh air, and he didn't like what he called stable noises of the other people in the camp, snoring and stable noises. And he enjoyed the light, the landscape, the scenery, and early morning. He continued to keep his diary. And even when conditions were very, very bad, he shows a gentle sense of humour. In 1945 he wrote,
"In recent months I've had to dispose of some of my few trinkets for several reasons. First to go were 1 or 2 studs, companions of festive occasions who rested outside many a good dinner and nestled against many a soft bosom. Inconspicuously, they attended functions from Algiers to Hankow. Next, of all things, my lower denture, sharer of my meals since 1930, but now a misfit."
In the conscious and deliberate exercise of memory, he found a way of compensating for the deprivations of the camp. He comments on this strategy in an essay he was obliged to write for the Japanese authorities.
"As the outside world at present is a chaotic example of the futile stupidity of mankind, in order to remain normal, it is necessary to turn one's mind to thoughts of the beauties and wonders of nature and simple things. Much that is interesting and wonderful and beautiful is to be observed even within the precincts of this camp. Insects, butterflies, flowers, grasses, birds, the changing sky, etc."
He then mentions the things not physically apparent, but accessible to the inward eye, memories of things he'd previously done and experienced and delighted in, and concludes the essay, with such refuges to fly to, what need to notice the sordid existence of a mere prison camp? However, these mental resources didn't obscure more prosaic interests, for example, food. So, there's a lengthy description at one point of rumours that Red Cross parcels had arrived after a very long period of lack. Well, as we know, the Japanese surrendered on the 16th of September 1945. Harry was repatriated to England via Manila on the Empress of Australia, and then on USS Gosper via Honolulu and San Francisco. We don't know whether he travelled on the Queen Mary across the pond, as he hoped to. On his return, he was among the many who received the following letter from King George VI.
Buckingham Palace. The Queen and I bid you a very warm welcome home. Through all the great trials and sufferings which you have undergone at the hands of the Japanese, you and your comrades have been constantly in our thoughts. We know from the accounts we have already received how heavy those sufferings have been. We know also that those and these have been endured by you with the highest courage. We mourn with you the deaths of so many of your gallant comrades. With all our hearts, we hope that your return from captivity will bring you and your families a full measure of happiness, which you may long enjoy together. George, Rex, September 1945.
And before we leave Harry, to meet the wife he hasn't seen for almost 9 years, and the sons who hardly know him, and to seek employment, let us take a look at his final ambitions as expressed in July 1945, seemingly so consonant with the point of view of the Chinese, among whom he had lived so long.
Had I the choice of my final resting place, I would choose to be buried, preferably in the form of ashes, at the head of a pass into the hills, where some primitive but well-used trail emerges from the mysterious hinterland and descends thence towards the sea. Amidst my ashes, a tree should be planted, which would symbolize a benevolent guardianship of the gateway. Then, growing individual, as such trees do, and a landmark, betoken a point of aspiration for the toiling wayfarers, with a promise too of welcome shade and refreshment. Beneath its spreading branches, there should be a simple tea house where the weary travellers might renew their strength and exchange the gossip of the way. There, on the pulse of one of the world's arteries, with the breezes in the leaves whispering of the trails among the soaring hills and the lands beyond the sparkling sea, should not my spirit find eternal satisfaction?
And if we also look at what J. Winter of Yale University has written, he said, "The inhumanity of armed conflict breaks many men, but not all of them, and certainly not Harry Collingwood-Selby. This is the tale of service, stamina, and survival, with lessons for us all."